thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Zoglin. I'm the chair of the Peninsula Chapter of World Affairs. Welcome to today's program entitled Ukraine Under Fire. We're very fortunate to benefit today from the insights of Oleksiy Honcharuk, who will be speaking to us from Kiev. He served as Ukraine's 17th prime minister and is the youngest person to ever have served as prime minister of Ukraine. As prime minister, he initiated important changes, such as implementing measures to reduce corruption, launching privatization processes, and other reforms. Before that, he served as deputy head of the Presidential Office of Ukraine and was a member of the National Reforms Council. He also served as an advisor to the Minister of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine. And he's done many more things in his background, but we only have a short time today, and there's so many important issues I'd love to us to get to. He also has a law degree and a degree in public administration. And this past year, he's been a visiting fellow at Stanford's Freeman Spogli Institute for International Stories. So for today's format is, you should feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we'll be answering those questions as we go along. We just have an hour today. Oleksiy, thank you so very much for joining us in a different time zone and really in the thick of things during this very critical moment for Ukraine. It might be helpful if you could start us off with what is the nature of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? You know, what is this invasion all about? Why? What is motivating Putin?
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, friends, for attention to our country. It's very important for us to feel your support in this very complicated moment of our history. And I believe not only our history, but the history of the free world. It's a great question about the nature of this. It's not a conflict, it's a war, full-scale war. I'm in Kiev, in the capital of Ukraine, and a couple of days ago, not far from this place, I'm from what I'm speaking to you, there were very hot battles for Kiev. So Russian troops, Russian soldiers were trying to take control over capital to destroy Ukraine as an independent state. But to understand this war, we should go, I believe, at least 8 years ago when this war was started. Because 8 years ago, Putin decided to annex Crimea and invade Donbas. It's eastern region of Ukraine. But their real goal was the same that they have now, is to destroy our independent and free country. Why? It's a very interesting question, and the answer is very simple. Because Ukraine is a democracy. It's not a war for territories. It's not a war because of religion, conflict, or because of language, or even because of culture. It's a conflict, it's a war because Ukraine is a democracy. And for Putin is an authoritarian state, and now we can compare him with Hitler, and it's not an exaggeration. Putin acting exactly like Hitler many years ago, exactly like Third Reich attacked, invaded Poland in 1939. And it was the same playbook. And the same playbook Putin and his criminal Kremlin crowd is using now against Ukraine. So the nature of this war is a war between two concepts, two big ideologies. And the authoritarian world, the big authoritarian state, based on Sikh ideology, very close to Nazi ideology, is trying to destroy a young democracy, a young free country. Because for Putin, the main threat to his criminal crowd is a free people. Free people and democracy in Russia is the main and the biggest threat to Kremlin's power. This is exactly what he is scared of. And this is exactly why he decided to invade Ukraine after Revolution of Dignity, because in 2014, in Ukraine, it was a revolution of dignity. And exactly after this revolution of dignity, when people achieved freedom and won and achieved victory against a criminal regime, Putin decided to invade Ukraine because he understood that Ukraine finally, and without any doubts, is a democracy. And there is no any chance to take it back to the authoritarian fake Russian world. 75 years ago, actually, American diplomat George Kennan, maybe you heard about him, in his long telegram, it's an open letter to the Department of State, he wrote very important words to understand Russia. He wrote, "The West is a main ideological enemy of USSR, and Kremlin aimed to breed mistrust, bring division among democratic countries and inside countries, among people, suspicious between parties, social groups and citizens. Soviet authorities recognize only power and always retreat when meeting strongest opponents." Since then, almost nothing has changed in Kremlin's policy. So Kremlin is exactly acting like USSR in its worst period under Stalin. And it's very important to understand this, because the enemy, Kremlin's enemy and Putin's enemy, it's not Ukraine, it's a democracy as a concept. And the main enemy for Mr. Putin is a West, so-called West, so free world. Europe, United Nations, USA, Canada, UK, Australia, so all countries which choose the democracy as a main ideology. That's why it's impossible to imagine that Putin will stop on Ukraine. He will go further, doubtless, because for him, it's not enough to destroy one free country. For him, it's absolutely critical to destroy all free countries around Russia. Because for Russian people, free countries, free successful democracy, free successful societies with a freedom inside is a very dangerous example. Putin is scared of democracy, and that's why he is fighting, and he will fight with all possible ways to divide, to make weaker free democratic world. Before this, as I already mentioned, this war started 8 years ago. And all this period of time, Putin had been using different tools to act against the democracy. Political murders, military coups in Balkans, artificial crises, energy crisis in Europe, migration crisis in Europe. He took control over Belarus because Belarus is not an independent country anymore. Lukashenko is a puppet. Belarus is a puppet state. It's a pity, but the fact, Belarus is not an independent country anymore. Putin paid a huge and spent a huge, enormous amounts of resources to support propaganda machine, not only in Russia, not only in Ukraine, but in all over the world. So RT, Russian Today, to support fake narratives against vaccination. They supported anti-vax movements in Europe. They supported marginal and radical movements in Europe. They interrupted your elections actually in United States to undermine trust, to legitimate to your government. Actually, they have done everything possible with all possible tools, hybrid tools, to destroy trust, because the trust among countries, among people, they were trying to divide allies, Western allies. The main goal of all these actions was to undermine democracy, because democracy built and based on trust. That's why I believe, and when Putin understood that in his fake world, the Western world already divided enough not to support Ukraine, he decided to attack Ukraine one more time. He decided to start a full-scale war in the middle of Europe, because geographically Ukraine is the middle of Europe, is the biggest country in Europe, and he decided to invade Ukraine and to start this full-scale war only because he thought that West and Western world, the free world, is divided enough. And 8 years ago, when Putin invaded Crimea, annexed Crimea and invaded Donbass, the response, the answer of Western world was too weak. It was very weak sanctions, almost decorative sanctions. These sanctions were window dressing. Politicians were scared and were trying to just like to show a good face, if you know what I mean. So, and Putin felt it. And Putin thought that, and he understands it now, and he realized that the majority of Western leaders are scared, are weak and scared, and they will never decide to show him a real power, like George Kennan said, that Soviet authorities recognize only power, and Russia.
Do you think? Do you think to date the West response, Putin has been surprised by it all, or that he still views it as a weak response?
I think that, of course, it's weak response. Of course, it's weak response. As already mentioned, Putin is a new Hitler. Putin is a new Hitler, and I'm not exaggerating. If you had a chance to observe all these terrible pictures about this criminal, about these military crimes in Bucha near Kiev, if you don't, you should, I believe, to understand the nature of Russia today, because they're exactly acting like a Nazi soldiers during on the early Second World War. They say maybe even worse. So now about this war, when Putin decided to start this war, he saw that Ukrainian army and Ukrainian nation will give up in a couple of days. And of course he failed, because Ukraine can give up, or could give up, only in a fake Russian world. It's absolutely artificial Russian world. In the real world, in the reality, Ukraine will fight till the end, till the victory. And when Putin realized that it's impossible to take any big city in Ukraine, because all biggest cities in Ukraine are still controlled of our government, even Russian-speaking cities, even in regions with a big, before the war, level of support of loyalty to Russian state, even in that regions. when he realized that he failed with his plan A, they started to act like a terrorist organization. They started to fight and to kill civilians, and they already have killed, have killed, I believe, more than 10,000 civilians, because official numbers, UN numbers, are irrelevant. They count only officially recognized people. I'm sure that the level of our losses in the civilians, among civilians, much more than 10,000 people. I believe that total losses from both sides already something like 50,000 people in a month. Can you imagine this? In a month, it's a nightmare. It's incredible. It's absolutely impossible to imagine. They almost totally destroyed Mariupol. Mariupol, it used to be a big city with like 100,000 people living in. It's one of the biggest ports on the Black Sea. And it was one of the biggest Russian-speaking cities in Ukraine. So Russian-speaking cities. So they are killing, first of all, Russian-speaking cities, because these the people from these cities understand what freedom means, and they were living in a free cities, because Mariupol were a free city. And that's why for Putin, Russian-speaking people with more or less similar cultural background is a main threat, because Ukrainians and Russians used to have very close cultural, economic, sometimes even relatives ties. And that's why for Putin, freedom and successful democracy in Ukraine was a huge and main threat. And that was, as already mentioned, a real reason why Putin started this terrible war. So answering your question, existing sanctions is too little too late. It's not enough. It's still partial. It's if you are speaking about Hitler, it's absolutely obviously that you should use all possible sanctions, total isolation, economic isolation, financial, trade isolation as soon as possible, because every single dollar you still pay into them, they're using to buy weapons, to create the weapons, and they will use this weapon against you. Not only against Ukraine, but against Europe, against the United States. It's obviously, and it's absolutely, it's easy to prognose what will go next. And this war started only because Western position and Western sanctions and Western response to Crimea annexation and years ago was too weak, was like window dressing. And it's very important not to repeat the same mistake now.
You mentioned that there should be total sanctions. One of the audience members asked, well, this was before you had mentioned that total sanctions would be appropriate in total economic isolation. The audience member asked whether or not you think that the only solution now is another world war with direct military involvement from the West.
Look, I think that we are already in a world war, because the only nation, the only person wants to have a third world war is Putin. And he will go as far as we let him go. So if he will not stop him in Ukraine, he will go to Moldova, to Georgia. He will use all his hidden tools to provoke Northern Korea to use the nuclear power that they are playing with, like provoking and stimulating these authoritarian leaders. He will use his influence in Balkans, You maybe know that Bosnia is very close to war, to civil war now, that Serbia become aggressive against Kosovo exactly when Putin invaded Ukraine. Azerbaijan used this opportunity to fight against Armenia. So a lot of conflicts already happened because Putin's example is very visible. And if Putin will achieve something in Ukraine, if Putin will succeed with his aggression, China will do the same. China will use the same playbook against Taiwan and against his neighbors. So only way to stop, to avoid Third World War is to show aggressor that it's unacceptable to use military power. It's really unacceptable to use military power. And I'm sure that, as George Kennan said, I'm sure that if NATO will use military power now to stop him inside Ukraine, so in Ukraine, to help us to stop Putin, maybe not fighting him directly, but at least giving us heavy weapons. So some heavy weapons, not only light one, but enough, heavy enough to stop Putin, because now it's not. Only because, only if we will stop him as soon as possible and we will destroy his death machine in Ukraine, he will not go further. Otherwise, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Finland, because Belarus is already like controlled, totally controlled and annexed by Kremlin. Poland, Moldova, Georgia will be next, I believe. And like imagine if Ukraine fails and Putin take control over Ukraine, and Western world is deeply concerned and used all possible economic tools to isolate Russia. Putin understands that there is no any chance for him, and that his economy anyway will die. And Finland and Sweden, of course, will join NATO because they will be scared. And Putin will demand NATO to move back to the, like, I don't know, 30 years ago borders. Will NATO accept this demand? Of course not. And for Putin, it will be one more reason to go further. Why not? Moldova used to be a part of USSR too. Why not? Why not Moldova? And Putin goes to Moldova. And what will be Romania's reaction? Look, I'm just think in a couple of steps further. One more time, it's a spiral of violence. We learned history and we understand very well that every single next step will raise the stake and will make harder to stop this war. Because now, at this moment, thousands of people died. Dozens. In a couple of weeks, it will be 100,000 people died. And maybe in a year, it will be millions died. And then every single next step will make this war more unstoppable. That's why the only way to show all other authoritarian states like China, for example, that it's unacceptable to use military power to attack neighbors, especially democratic neighbors. Only way to stop Putin and to avoid his further aggressions to Europe. Only way to protect peaceful nations around a authoritarian state is to use a military power now, because every single day, every single next day, will make Third World War closer and closer, because other countries will start its other local conflicts. And all these local conflicts will create two big, I don't know, camps, yeah, two big sides, two big teams, global teams, to fight for the sphere of interest. And that's exactly how Third World War could look like.
One of the attendees asked, why is the West and the U.S. failing to provide the support Ukraine needs to defend itself now? What is needed to stop the bombardment of Ukrainian citizens and push Russian troops out of Ukraine?
I think that the real reason that Western leaders are scared. They're not ready to take responsibility. And what I see and what I understand, that people in United States, people in United Kingdom, people in Europe are much braver than your politicians and your leaders. And it looks like anyway, they will provide us weapons. Anyway, guys, because it's only possible way to stop this nightmare. But every single day we lose, and every single day of waiting, we need more and more and more resources. So 8 years ago, it could be only a projection of a power. So if NATO like showed Putin that it's unacceptable to annex Crimea, and he will have a heavy conflict, military conflict, if he will use his soldiers to annex this territory, it would be at that moment, it was enough to stop him. Only a projection of power without any hot war. On the latest stages, we asked about some heavy weapons, about some anti-aircraft systems. We asked about it. But Western world avoided to provide us, to give us these weapons, not to provoke Putin. It was failed logic, but their explanation was, okay, guys, we are not ready to give you weapons, normal weapons, to protect yourself because we are scared, we don't want to provoke him. And now it's absolutely obvious that Putin don't need any provocation, don't need any reason to stop a war, to start the war. The only signal he needs to start the war is to understand, to see that the opponent is weak and scared. And his opponent is not Ukraine. His real opponent is the Western world. And he see that now, he understand now, he observed that West is weak and scared. That's why he is still trying to make you scared, sending the fighters to go to the airspace of Poland or Finland. So he's playing muscles and so on and so forth to make you scared. And it's a pity. It means that he still, that your leaders, Western leaders, still feeding him with fear. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. I didn't know if you could tell us a little bit about what's going on in Kiev right now and the immediate suburbs around it.
Kiev is a fortress now, is a fortress. Almost all our women and children moved to the west of our country or abroad, even abroad. And a huge part, almost all our men, came to Kiev and to eastern part of our country to fight against Russia. Something like more than 90% of our population, of our people, believe that Ukraine will prevail and that we will win this terrible war. The situation in Kiev a week ago was complicated because Russian troops was trying to they concentrated a big parts, big amounts of troops around Kiev to press and to create a danger, to keep our capital in danger, and to create a psychological pressure on us. They realized that they don't have any chance to take control over Kiev, and that their first plan failed. And now they moved, they were forced by our troops to go away from Kiev, and they take their troops, so that they ran away, and they took their troops to the territory of Russia and Belarus to send them to eastern part of our country to create a bigger amount of troops and stronger fist military fist to destroy Kharkiv and to take control over all eastern part of Ukraine. Now it will be next couple of weeks on the theater of eastern part of Ukraine will be a huge battle between two big armies, biggest armies in Europe. And of course, Russia still has a huge advantage because they have spent enormous amounts of money, so like dozen billions dollars to create and to buy new weapons. They are a very militarized country, and that's why, of course, because of very big difference of these budgets, Ukraine will be and now in a complicated situation. And that's why exactly we need the support of a Western world, because we have a lot of people who are ready to fight. We're not scared. We're not Afghanistan. We will fight till the end. But it's impossible to fight against heavy weapons without heavy weapons. It's impossible, just like we will die. And I believe that globally, so in the end of the day, Russia don't have any chance to take control over Ukraine and to destroy Ukraine now, but they want. Their real goal is to destroy our nation, but they're too weak to do this. And that's why they're acting like a terrorist organization, and they are trying to create as much pain for us as they can. They are trying to kill all possible civilians. They are trying to destroy all possible cities, to create all possible humanitarian catastrophe, as huge as they can create, to force our government to give up, to force our government to negotiate about something. That's why, without Western support, it's impossible to finish, to stop this war in a nearest future, in a nearest perspective.
Do you see any prospect of a negotiated peace in the near term? And if not, what do you think would bring Putin to the negotiation table?
Only power. When he will realize that he's losing his war, that he don't have any chance to go further, and his army destroyed, so his death machine is destroyed, he will be forced to negotiate. But I don't believe, I don't see any realistic scenario in which it's possible to have a peace with Putin. Because can you imagine a peace with Hitler as a result of Second World War? It's impossible to imagine this, because and Putin has the same logic. He already sent and he already has more than 80,000 soldiers killed in Ukraine. Can you imagine this amount? So his decision months ago to send all these people, all these like soldiers to Ukraine, created a damage to Russia, to Russian Federation, enormous damage. They have lost more people than in Afghan war, in the war in Afghanistan. But war in Afghanistan was like many years, more than 10 years long. And here it's like 40 days. It's absolutely unprecedented in the history of Russia, military loss. And I can't imagine this realistic scenario, how Putin will stop, how Putin will decide to have peace with Ukraine, because their goal is to destroy nation. And they are openly like declare this. So not Putin personally, of course. Putin personally used to like talking about that Ukraine and Russia is the same nation. So there is no any Ukrainian nation. So it's Russians, but some part of Russians, which used by United States to destroy Russian Federation. So Ukrainians is not Ukrainians. Ukrainians is their own Russians with their own ideology. And Ukrainians are puppets of a Western world, aggressive puppets of a Western world. They betrayed it, Russian world, and they are going to destroy Russian world. This is a framework, ideological framework of Mr. Putin. And in this framework, there is no any way out. There is no any room for negotiations about a peace. I believe that it's possible to negotiate about some temporary, like peaceful period, but it's impossible to make agreements with Russia, because Russia easily destroy any agreements, easily. Maybe you remember that 3 months ago, in January, Lavrov was asked about intentions, and he answered that, of course, we are not going to attack Ukraine. Of course, it's rumors. It's rumors and fairy tales shared by United States government to create anti-Russian coalition. It's like, it's easy to check it. A lot of evidences in the internet about it. So their message was clear. We are not going to invade Ukraine. We are not going to attack Ukraine. It's fakes produced by United States government. And then, as you perfectly know, they invaded Ukraine. And when Lavrov, the same Lavrov, was asked in Istanbul a couple of weeks ago, why you invaded Ukraine? And are you going to invade European countries, further European countries from a European Union? He answered, of course, we are not going to invade European Union countries, but we didn't invade Ukraine. So like these people, just realize it, these people living in a totally artificial, totally fake Russian world, so-called. And in this Russian world, there is no any room for existence for me, for example, for Ukrainians. And Ukraine is a peaceful country. Ukraine never invaded, never attacked nobody, never invaded neighbors. We are a peaceful country. We are country, the only country in the world gave up our third potential nuclear military potential in the world 25 years ago. We just like gave it up under the guarantees of United States, United Kingdom, and Russia, actually. So
I think you answered another audience member's question with that answer, but just to make sure, this person wanted to know, I mean, you've given some examples how you can't believe what Russian representative told. This person asked, is there anyone in the Kremlin who could be trusted to negotiate in good faith?
I don't think so. Look, it's a negative selection, if you know what I mean. So when you have a authoritarian system with a strong leader is trying to destroy all possible strong leaders with some, I don't know, moral skills, with some strong will, with independent position. So all Russian political elite are Putin puppets. I don't see any Russian politician or person or statement in Kremlin with whom it's possible to speak. So of course we should speak, and of course Ukrainian government will speak, because for us we are democracy, and for us every single person's life, people's life matter. And if there is a 1% of a hope to stop fighting, to stop shooting each other, to stop killing people, we will fight we will spend and we'll do some efforts to find this opportunity to stop fighting. But for Putin, a Russian soldier is not a person. A Russian soldier is a resource, is like it's nothing. Russian soldiers is nothing. Just imagine this. More than 1,800 soldiers, Russian soldiers, killed in this very short war, 40 days war. It's incredible. It's absolutely impossible to believe, even to realize amount of the people's life. They have lost more than 100 fighters, more than 100 fighters. It's more than France has, I believe. So it's like they already have lost enormous resources and enormous amounts of people's life in Ukraine, and they will go further, and they will spend as many money, as much money as they will kill as many soldiers, as many civilians as they could. So they are living in an absolutely different world, in an absolutely other world, and I understand you when you can't understand that.
On a different note, one of our audience members would like to know what are the current laws regarding education in the Russian language in Ukraine?
One more time, I'm sorry.
What are there certain laws about the teaching of the Russian language in Ukraine? What languages are taught in the schools? Are there any laws regarding that? Or
look, it's a totally fake information. I will explain. I'm a Russian-speaking person. I was a prime minister of this country. Our president is a Russian-speaking Jew. So there is not any problem to speak Russian in Ukraine. No problems, just zero problems. And now they destroy, and first of all, Russian-speaking cities. So for them, this topic about Russian language is only a reason to attack us. I graduated Russian-speaking school. And for example, in Crimea, when they invaded and annexed Crimea, more than 90% of all schools in Crimea were Russian-speaking schools. So it's not a reason. For the last, since war started 8 years ago, of course, our government made some number of decisions to support Ukrainian language in our official sphere, only in official sphere, only in that spheres financed by Ukrainian budget, because we want as a state to finance from our budget only Ukrainian speaking like institutions. But it doesn't mean that you can't open Russian speaking school, private school in Ukraine. So one more time, there is not any problem with Russian language in Ukraine because I'm a Russian speaking person. But yes, since war started, since in this last 8 years, we decided, Ukrainian state decided to finance from a budget and to support with a budget only Ukrainian language, only institutions based on Ukrainian language. And it's our sovereign right, I believe. And it's based on the reality, because Russian use the language as a weapons against us. So they decided that all people who speak Russian needs their protection. It's a reason to invade other country because some people, some Russian-speaking people in Ukraine needs their protection. I'm a Russian-speaking person. I don't need their protection. But as I already mentioned, Hitler used against Poland the same argument. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland to protect ethnic Germans in the Czech Republic and in Poland. And it was a reason to invade these independent countries. So we can discuss some, I don't know, policies, humanitarian policies in the education sphere, maybe in other sphere. It could be discussed. And there is a discussion in our society. But it's a fake, it's a total fake that we have some problem in the Russian, with the Russian language in Ukraine.
With the, you know, we've been hearing the horrible news regarding Bucha. Is there any reason to believe that those kind of atrocities have been occurring in other parts of Ukraine as well?
Of course, Russian soldiers acting like an enemies, not enemies, like animals. So, but it's wild animals without any moral limits. They are like raping children. They're like.
But have you heard of in other towns or regions other than Bucha some of the same things that we're hearing?
Of course, it's not only about Bucha. You think that you heard first of all about Bucha because of very visible examples. But the same situation in Hostomel, in Irpin, in Borodyanka, in like dozens towns in Ukraine. So a lot of examples, hundreds raped like women and children, hundreds, guys. So one more time, when I'm speaking that he's a Hitler and the Russian soldiers, Russian army acting exactly right in Nazi, I'm not exaggerating. I know what I'm speaking about, what I'm talking about, and it's enough like evidences you can find in the internet, in the social medias, to support to check this statement. They are trying to make us scared, and they are trying to destroy our will, to break our will, but they will fail because we remember our history. Ukrainian nation has very complicated history with Russian nation, because Russian people for at least couple of 100 years have been using and have been destroying our culture and our people. Ukrainians, a lot of Ukrainians were slaves to Russian like bosses, I believe. So we have very complicated history, and we have very deep traditions fighting against our for our independence. That's why lessons learned, historical lessons learned. We don't want to have one more period in our history when Russia will control our state and will hiddenly and silently kill us as a nation. We'll fight for our freedom. We'll fight for our independence and sovereignty. And we will win. Ukraine will prevail. Democracy will prevail. And one more time, Russia is fighting not against Ukraine as a only nation. Ukraine in their fake Russian world is only first goal, what most visible, most dangerous for them goal, but only first goal, because the real goal for Russia is to undermine and destroy democracy, at least in the region, and to undermine democracy as an idea, to divide the Western world and to become a great power in the world, to become a new Rome, new empire, and so on and so forth. So it's absolutely sick society with sick leaders, with a fake and artificial world, and they're very dangerous for all of us, guys, for all of us.
One audience member would like to know, what would you like to see the West do now? And then also on a more individual level, how can Americans help as individuals?
First of all, total economic isolation as soon as possible. Not playing with partial sanctions, banks, SWIFT, or so on and so forth. All possible tools should be used, economic use. Total economic isolation. Because every single dollar you are paying to them, they are one more time using to create weapons and to fight against you. It's very simple, and there are a lot of evidences about it. Second, to provide and to give Ukraine, maybe even to sell us, please, we are ready to buy it. We don't need like it's for free. We are ready to buy it. But please give us a normal weapons to fight against Russians, because Russians has enormous advantages in a technique and weapons, because they have spent like dozen billions dollars, oil dollars, to build these test machines, and to spend. We are ready to stop them. We are ready to stop them, and we are already stopping them. But we need your support with weapons. We need heavy weapons, anti-aircraft systems, tanks, fighters, so on and so forth. Your officials, your political leaders perfectly understand what's going on and what do we need. And they are playing. They are trying to win some time. They are playing games. because they are scared. And they still think that they can provoke Putin. But how is possible to provoke a person who started the war against the biggest country in Europe? It's impossible to imagine.
And then what can individuals do? Americans do? And including one person asked, is there a fund to help rebuild Ukraine yet? And if does something exist? And just in general, what can Americans do to help?
So now we feel absolutely enormous and total support from the people of a free world. Thank you very much for this. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And without this support, it would be a very complicated task to fight against Putin. So you're already doing enough, I believe. Not your leaders, but you, first of all, people. But please push your, I don't know, official, your senator, your congressman, your maybe even president. So use political tools to influence your leaders, to explain them that they should act. They shouldn't be scared, because if you're scared, you already have lost. This is the first task. The second, there are a lot of information in the internet, how to support us with some funds, because Ukrainian society and Ukrainian state needs some support with funds. We are not like very poor country. We have enough resources to live, even to fight, but it's very complicated to fight against Putin and at the same time to maintain some economic life in Ukraine. So it's very complicated task. And now it's very important to have all possible support you can provide us. And third, of course, is to help our refugees, because a lot of people, like millions of Ukrainians now, forced to leave the country, and or they need shelters. And if you can, please invite them, support them, provide some information, provide some support. I don't know, individual support. Maybe you know somebody from Ukraine. But one more time, you're already doing a lot, and thank you for this.
Well, thank you. And unfortunately, our time is up now. I want to thank you so much for your time and for your insights. We've really benefited from that. And thank you to the audience for your great questions as well. So
Thank you.
Thank you. And Ukraine and its people are in our thoughts.